Today I'm going to show a method for making a large round form using two wooden bats that are designed to be mounted on the wheel head using the pins. So before I started, I put the pins into the wheel head, and they correspond with these drilled holes. Now, what's really important to make this method work is I use equal amounts of clay. I've wedged up 12 pounds, I've wedged up two 12-pound balls of clay, and I measured the bats to be the same diameter. So those are the sort of parameters, specifications for making this work. So think of the Earth having an equator. Above the equator is the northern hemisphere. Below the equator is the southern hemisphere. This method is, I'm going to throw two domes because clay likes being cylinders, cones, and domes when the clay is wet and pliable. It's going to be much easier for me to throw a dome wide at the bottom, narrow at the top, than the other way around. So think of the Earth again. I'm going to throw the southern hemisphere, the lower half, first, and then I'm going to enclose it. So in a way, I'm going to show how to throw a bottle shape that I'm going to completely close, and that'll be the bottom of the pot. Then I'll throw the top part, and then tomorrow, after the two of them have been allowed to get leather hard, we'll reassemble them. So I'm going to start by putting this bat, I need to demonstrate the measure using a ruler. I'm going to use a 16-inch diameter, 16-inch diameter bat. And it's acting like it's not going to want to stick. So what should I do about that? Okay. No power. Okay, let's see if that helps. There we go. That should do the trick. All right, we're in business. Should probably put it. Say, Marcus. I'm wondering if, okay, so I've measured two 12-pound balls of clay. In the first, and I've measured two bats 16 inches in diameter, the same size. And step one is to open the center of the clay, open it into a big donut, so that I'm throwing the lower half of the two. I'm going to throw two hemispheres and then join them tomorrow. So the first step is to open the clay up and get a large centered donut out to the edge, the outer edge of the bat. This will allow me to throw a large dome shape. So clay likes it when gravity is working in harmony with what you're doing. It's a lot harder to throw a bowl. It's a lot harder to throw a bowl because centrifugal force and gravity wants it to expand out like this. But if you're making a dome shape right from the start, it's way easier. Okay, we need to pause here because I've got some stragglers coming from for a drop-off. Okay, so I'm going to start throwing now, the pinching and pulling step. And in the first pinch and pull, I'm going to use my index fingers on the inside and my thumb on the outside in my left hand to pinch and pull. And while that's happening, I'm going to be using my right hand to compress the clay at the rim to keep this big fat donut a uniform thickness as I go. And I want each pull to be conical because ultimately I'm going to want a dome shape. Now, with every kind of throwing on the pottery wheel, you always want to try to get the wall thicknesses as uniform as possible. In the case of a bottle, you want to have more clay in the top third than in the lower 2/3. See, so you'll want to throw thinner on the lower 2/3 because I'm going to want a reserve of clay here to close the form. Okay, so now notice I've got my sponge. I got a sponge in my hand, but I'm not throwing with the sponge. If you can see closely, I'm using my middle index finger on the outside and my middle index finger on the inside to pinch and pull. And here now I'm at the top third. I'm going to let up the pressure. I'm going to not pinch as hard in the top third because I need that extra clay for closing it. If I were to, take a wire and cut this right now, you'd see that the wall thicknesses are thinner here than here. Again, I want to make a cone shape because ultimately I'm going to stretch this cone out to make it a bulbous form. I don't know, my sponge is in the way now of what I'm trying to do. Okay. Now I'm going to collar this in to, it needs to be narrow enough that I can start the process of closing this, but it needs to be wide enough that I can still get my hand in here for the final process of spreading this out thinner. Now it would be a good idea, after this pull, I'm going to use a rib because I'm going to want to be able to stretch this. Part of the challenge with making a large vessel this way is visualizing what the bottom half needs to look like. So you have to actually be able to have that in your mind. I'm sure there's some kind of template that could be made. Oh, you know, I'm using a wooden rib, and I really don't prefer a wooden rib. I prefer a metal rib, because the surface area of a metal rib is much finer. It's like almost like a razor, and I can conform the rib to whatever shape I'm wanting to make. Now, right here, this sway is where most beginners have trouble making an enclosed or a closed form or a bottle. And that's because what usually predisposes that problem is that they throw it too thin here in the top third, and then that gravity takes over and causes it to collapse. So that's why I'm always wanting this part of the clay to be thicker than this part of the clay. Now, I'm also noticing that the splash pan is getting in my way. And it's pretty much done its job of catching the water. If you'll notice, I stopped using water because I don't need it anymore. So I'm going to remove the splash pan so it's not in my way. I want to go right out to the edge of the bat so that that ensures that the two hemispheres are going to be the same size.
Are you using the sponge on the inside to push the clay out?
Yes, I'm using it as a lubricant to force it out further. Good, that was a good observation. Now, when you're using a metal rib, some of the clay will scrape off like that. That's normal. But if you're not careful, it'll catch, and this whole blob will grab, the pot will grab that blob, and then it's really hard to get that back off. So you want to try to avoid that. Okay, now I'm pushing out from the inside while I'm shaping on the shaping with the rib on the outside. Okay, so what I'm noticing here, I set out originally to do the bottom half first, but what I'm realizing now is that I'm going to need to add clay, another pound or so, maybe £2 or two, to that next bump, so that I'll have enough clay to make the bottom. So I'm going to choose to make this be the northern hemisphere instead of the southern hemisphere. I can just tell by how much clay I've got left right here. I've got enough to make the top half of the piece, but not the bottom half. So now when I want to make sure I have a kind of inflated shoulder, so it has a fullness. And I want to finish the rim of this with enough clay that it seems, a substantial, kind of beefy looking rim. A lot of times beginners will run out of clay, and then this part's really thin and fragile looking, which is, thin and fragile looking. It's not going to be what you're not going to be happy with that.
So was there just not enough clay to make it into the southern hemisphere?
Yeah, I started out with 12 pounds, and what this half is teaching me is that I need to have more like 14 pounds for the bottom half. The bottom half is obviously going to take more clay. So I'm going to choose to take the cue from the clay and stop here. This is the top half. So this and the bottom half will go into the damp room overnight. And tomorrow this will be stiff enough that I'll be able to grab this and put it over on the lower half.
And if you were to cut that in half, how thick would you say the walls would be?
Less than a 1/4 inch. Yeah. I may actually do that as part of this demonstration. I may wedge up a 3rd bump and actually do that so that we can see that. It's a good idea. Okay, let's pause here.
And we're rolling?
Okay, so now I'm going to do the second half. I'm going to apply the same size wooden bat to the wheel head using the pins. This time I've wedged up 14 pounds of clay. This is 2 pounds more than the first half, because we discovered it takes more clay to do the lower half of the pot. Let's see, notice that I'm using my body weight over the top of the bump, so that it takes power in the arms and shoulders, but it also helps to use your upper body as a force also. My left hand is like a hook, which is shaping the donut. My right hand is wedged against my leg so that I can keep the donut centered. So I'm using a kind of gripping action with this hand and forcing down. It's a push-pull. I'm pulling with this hand and pushing with this hand. The center of my wrist, right here, is in the center. Now I'm going to pull toward me once I've reached the bottom. There's no bottom to this donut. It's all, I'm just throwing it right on the wheel. I'm going all the way down to the wheel in the center. So the other way I could do this, if this is too physically demanding to make a bump, open it and pull it out like that, I can also use the extruder and make a big large donut out here from the start. That's another approach.
You could show both.
Yeah.
This is for advanced students, right?
Yeah.
So they should be.
By that time, the advanced students would be familiar with the extruder.
And they don't have to make it on such a big bat either.
Right. This technique could be used on a. Oh dear. Oh. Went quiet by itself. How about that? This could be. Let's see. I'm using a 16-inch bat. This technique could be used on a 12 or 14-inch bat too. What are the dimensions of the bats that we have?
I think 12 and.
12 and 14?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have maybe one or two 16.
The big plastic ones are 14, I think. Okay, so again, this time I've pulled this donut out to the outer edge of the wooden bat.
So does he need to film you doing it, or do you just
Oh, this
get
would-
it to the point where
This would be a good place to pause and